Those who don't know, Ms. Leonis, what's exactly is an emotional disturbed student? What's some of the complexities? What's an emotional disturbed student?
So a student with emotional disturbance has qualified for setting, how do you explain it? Due to their test scores by both psychological testing and the test the teacher gives. So that means that they have maybe, a lot of times, what's interesting, a student with emotional disturbance might have their testing from like the Woodcock-Johnson or those other tests might actually show a student that's scoring not really in the 60 range, they're more like 80 to 100 a lot. Sometimes they're a little lower, but they're not really outliers a lot.
Okay.
But then when the psychologist did their testing with them, they're seeing that they're not learning due to their emotional disturbance. So that's the reason. So a lot of times you might have a kid that's actually a pretty strong reader, but is not learning or failing all their classes due to something with a mental health. It's just a mental health issue.
Okay.
Depression, or they say that kids with oppositional defiant disorder they can be with you, but kids with conduct disorder are supposed to be still in general ed.
Okay.
So it's kind of an interesting thing that's happening with that now. So it used to be you got more kids with conduct disorder, but now they're kind of pushing it more. It's more like students with bipolar disorder, students with a lot of depression. A student might be schizophrenic. And students that are schizophrenic and with bipolar disorder kind of looks similar in the classroom.
Or what are ED teachers' challenges? What's the challenge of an ED teacher?
I think the biggest challenge for ED teachers is the lack of preparation and just the fact that they're dealing with students that are in crisis most of the time. So for a student to end up in a program for students with emotional disturbance, they've been through multiple programs before they got to you. So they were probably identified as an RSP student. They might have been in an RSP program for a while, or a non-severely handicapped class, like an SDC class. And by the time they've come to you, they've sort of failed in all of those different programs from the general ed set. Sometimes they come straight for a general ed setting to you due to like extreme behaviors or something really serious happens. So your challenge is dealing with a kid that's in crisis or going in and out of crisis, finally coming out of crisis, maybe a hostile family, a child that could be very hostile to you, who's experienced a lot of stress in their lives, and then they kind of bring it to the classroom. And then your job is to try to educate a kid who has the ability to learn. Their brains are usually it's not a student with a cognitive disability sometimes, but very rarely it's usually a student with a learning disability, or the reason that they're there is because they're not learning due to emotional problems.
Okay.
So that kid's already stressed, and then you're trying to teach them grade level stuff. And it's not like they don't really get it, it's just there's a lot of behaviors you're having to deal with in the classroom.
Okay. What kind of activities do you do? What's a typical lesson plan or?
So a mental health classroom is going to have a very different look than another classroom. Like you have your kids going to come in, and we usually do like a daily check-in. And then what you're doing from the beginning of the daily check-in is you get in like, what is their mood? And you really work a lot on the kids talking about how they're feeling at the time. So you really want to know, as the teacher and as a staff member in the classroom, like, what's this kid's mood when he walks in? And you can get a really good idea of how your day is going to be based if you give them a number between 1 and 10. You get the kid to tell you if they're 1, 2, what that means, a statement about what that means. Then you try to get them to use deeper words. So it's not like, I'm just mad. You want to say, why are you mad? What made you feel mad? And then a goal for the day. And so you have the kids set a goal for their day. Like, today, I'm going to not cuss. I'm not going to use the F word. I'm going to do all my work today. You want to have a goal that's achievable for that student. And you always want to have an out for them too. So it's really hard to not get into conflict with students throughout the day. So you're avoiding conflict, and you're trying to use strategies to get out of conflict. And you're trying to make sure that they're learning something too. So you have to have this kind of therapeutic classroom with a lot of behavioral strategies. So when I've taught, the best strategies I've seen work was when we had a level system in the classroom and we did timeouts. And then the timeouts would lead to a further consequence. But it wasn't like we sent a kid to the counselor for swearing. It was like, okay, you just swore, you have a 2-minute timeout, or 1 minute, whatever it is that we had in the program. And then you try to just work around that and make sure that there's no behaviors don't escalate too high.
Okay. What's a typical behavior that you may see from an ED student?
So a typical behavior might be like, okay, it's time to start, if we're talking about like a more inward student, well, it could either manifest either way, but you might be like, okay, this is the assignment, you might start your lesson, and you give the kid the work to do, and they might like just push the binder off the desk, or put their head down, or
So
pull
like
their
a
sweater
defiance,
up.
more of a defiance
exactly.
kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that sort of part of the teaching is to make sure that you're using lessons that they're interested in. So
Well, thank you, Ms. Leonis, for your time. I know you have a class to teach in a few minutes, but thank you anyway for the information.
all right, you're welcome.